In my head, I said, well, sweetheart, because in my head, that's what I call myself, sweetheart. So I said, well, sweetheart, walking underneath these big trees makes me wonder sometimes, how'd these big trees get here? Did somebody plant them? Was it just nature doing its thing? Because we've got some pretty big trees in our backyard and on our property here. And so my thoughtful discussion with myself began. All in my head. All in my head thinking what a wonderful, beautiful, amazing place that we live in and piece of land that we call our own is so picture perfect in our American dream. It just couldn't be any better, could it? But thanks to me, I knew it could just get a tiny bit better when I did this podcast tonight. And we spend a lot of our lives just surviving, trying to get ahead. Working the daily grind, nose to the grindstone. You've heard it. I've heard it. We've all heard it. Work, work, work. Get ahead, get ahead, get ahead. Till you don't have to work anymore. You're just a hamster on the wheel, spinning around. And that's natural. Life has that trajectory for most people. You work, you get ahead, someday you retire. Now you can lengthen that or shorten that duration depending on choices that you make. But somewhere along the way, if we're paying attention, our perspective kind of starts to change. And it shifts from that work, 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 try to get ahead, try to get ahead, try to get ahead, to what am I leaving behind? I'm getting older. The world isn't just ours alone. A lot of people live here. And we inherited it from those that came before us. We inherited it. We did not commit their sins or atrocities or any of that. We inherited it. It was passed on to us. And we're shaping it today. And one day, we're going to hand it to someone else. Maybe life isn't necessarily about writing the whole story. Maybe it's just about writing our chapter the best we can. So tonight we're going to talk about what chapter are you writing? We were walking in the backyard the other night, my wife and I, underneath the big oak trees that we have out there. As we're walking along the path like we often do to admire the plants and the new landscape back there, she asked me, so it's been a year since, And I said, what? She said, yeah, when, it's been about a year. I said, no, it's been like 2 days, but what the heck is going on with you? She said, no, my gosh, not that. Since you hurt your quad. How are you feeling? I said, I'm feeling great. She said, no, how are you feeling? I said, well, it feels like I had surgery about a year ago and it's starting to get better and stronger now. And at that point, I got the side eye, right? Like the roll of the eyes and everything else. But as we're walking along, I couldn't help but chuckle to myself. Have you ever found yourself wandering around, maybe in your community, maybe out in the forest, standing beneath a giant tree? Could be a redwood tree, could be a sequoia, regular pine tree, or big old oak tree like we have around us, and wondered, who planted this? How did it get there? Didn't necessarily wonder what kind of tree it was. Didn't wonder how old it was. But who decided to put it there, at that spot? How did the seed get in the ground? Did somebody dig a hole for it? An animal? A little bird? Who watered it when it was just a little sapling? And the odds are pretty good that if it was a person, they never enjoyed the tree the way that we do today. Maybe they sat beneath it once or twice, or maybe they never did. But somebody planted it anyway. I think that's one of the most overlooked truths in life. Because when we're young, we're focused on getting ahead, right? We're focused on what's right in front of us. And it's something that we struggle to correct. Maybe that's not the right word, but something that we struggle to work on in a business sense too. You can't always be focused on what's right in front of you. You've got to look out ahead of you. Maybe it's a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, depending on what you're doing. Maybe it's a couple of months. And think a little farther ahead. Because when we're young, we're just worried about, how do I get through school? And you think back to those high school years, those college years. There are years that I have no idea how I made it through. Pretty sure I just survived on the Cliff Notes for about every book we had to read in high school. And wondering how we made it, I don't know at times, but we did. But then you worried about, how do I find a career? How do I buy a house? How do I raise kids? There's no book or manual for those little buggers. You got to figure it out. And even if your parents tell you that there is a book or a manual or a way to do it, you still got to figure it out because their way is not your way. How do I pay the bills? How do I finally get ahead? It is harder and harder to do today. And honestly, that's exactly what we're supposed to do, right? Life demands that we survive first. And then, once you've accomplished that, the perspective changes. There's nothing selfish about wanting to provide for your family or improve your situation. And let's face it, I've spent a lot of years asking those same questions, but eventually, if we're paying attention, something starts to change. One day you realize something that never really occurred to you before. Almost everything good in your life exists because someone else thought beyond themselves. The road you drove on this morning. The company that gave you your first job opportunity. Maybe the neighborhood where you raised your family. The traditions you celebrate every year at Christmas. The park where your kids played. The church you attend. The local 4-H program. Even the giant tree that might be standing in front of you. None of it appeared by accident. Someone built it. They protected it. And they invested in something they might never fully enjoy themselves. And once you notice that, it's hard to look at the world the same way again. And I don't care how old you are or how wise you may think you are. And it may be stereotypical, but there is a demographic of human beings that until they're well past their 30s and into their 40s, they just don't see it that way. Life is about survival. It is about cashing the biggest checks you can cash as quick as you can cash them. And maybe there's a little regret there. Maybe I should have gone harder after those big checks when I was a younger man, when my knee and my quad was still naturally attached to it. But I didn't. Took the family business route. And that doesn't always lead to the fastest or most appreciative way of being raised or of raising a family. And you don't see that perspective. You don't see that somebody investing in something they might never fully enjoy themselves until later, especially in my situation. Because it's a climb, it's a grind every day. And I'm sure it is in yours too. I'm not unique in this. But just imagine if we could make that perspective come a little bit sooner. How much more would people enjoy the world that they're in? How much more would they appreciate the work of those who came before us, rather than trying to tear down their memories or rewrite the history books? Because let's be honest, none of us starts the story. None of us start this book of life at chapter 1. We're jumping in at all different sorts of times. If every decade was a chapter, golly, we're on chapter 226 or so. We all just get born into the middle of the story. We're all living inside chapters that somebody else started writing. And our parents, they wrote part of the story. Our grandparents wrote part of the story. We have teachers in our past. We have people who gave us jobs, neighbors, volunteers, friends, people whose names we'll never know, people whose names we've forgotten. And some of those chapters were incredible, and some weren't. But every one of us inherits something the moment that we're born. We don't get to choose where the book begins. We only get to choose what we write next. And maybe we've been asking the wrong questions all along. Rather than looking back and thinking, what did I ask? Well, I know what I asked. I was asking, how do I get ahead? How do I get more money? How do I retire? How do I accomplish more? Grow, be more, grow, and be more. How do I make this kingdom bigger? How do I spread my word to more people? And those aren't bad questions, but maybe they're incomplete. Maybe another question belongs alongside them. And this is where we started tonight. What chapter am I writing? As I get older, I feel like I'm writing multiple chapters at the same time sometimes. There's just a lot going on. And that's not because I'm trying to, get ahead anymore. I'm not trying to make more money anymore. I am trying to retire, though. That would be great. But the chapter that I'm writing, none of us writes that whole book. We're just writing a chapter in the book. And we inherit a few chapters. We get to write a few chapters, and then we hand the book to somebody else. And I don't know why, but on some level, it's incredibly freeing. It reminds me that I don't have to fix everything. I don't have to accomplish everything. I don't have to finish the story. I just need to write my chapter the best that I can. And lately, I've been thinking about that a lot. You know, my dad started our construction company. I didn't. I didn't take the risk. But I have the opportunity and the responsibility to write the next chapter. And I'm doing the best that I can. My own building, Brigade Industrial. And we love that name. It's got a lot of sentimental meaning to my wife and I. So the ranch, the horses, the barn that is constantly getting improved lately for the horses. You know, camp. Even this podcast. None of these things begin or end with me. I'm simply holding the pen for a little while. Someday, somebody else is going to pick it up. And hopefully they're handed something a little better than what I received. The podcast is a great symbol of that. The podcast is a reflection of my story. And someday maybe somebody will pick it up. Somebody's going to come behind me. Maybe they'll continue the podcast. Maybe they won't. But they'll have their story to tell. They'll have their chapters to share with whoever wants to listen. And that's pretty cool if you ask me. And maybe that's how civilization works, right? Because, you know, when we talk about civilization, it's like this giant abstract thing that's out there. Civilization as we know it. Civilization this, civilization that. Well, maybe it isn't. Maybe civilization is simply millions of ordinary people writing good chapters. Maybe it's parents raising good kids. Maybe it's employers treating employees fairly. Teachers believing in students. Neighbors helping each other. Maybe it's volunteers giving up weekends. Maybe it's somebody planting a tree. None of those things changes the whole world overnight, but together they become the world we inherit. And the planting the tree theme of this podcast goes back to when I was 9, maybe 10. One of the community service projects that we did when I was a kid in our 4-H club down the hill in Sacramento County was we planted trees at Bannister Park. It was a park out by us, and it was on the side of the hill, and it had a great big old gully in it. It was all grass, but there was not a lot of shade, and there was not a lot of trees. Well, we had this grant or donation of, I don't know, we must have had 30 trees that we planted at that park that weekend. My parents were out there, my brothers were out there, and I was out there, and a whole slew of other people were out there planting these trees. And that's where the inspiration for the podcast tonight started. Started thinking about, I wonder what those trees look like. Wonder if they've grown. I wonder if they're still there. I haven't been to that park in decades. But I remember planting those trees. And I bet you that somebody else remembers planting the trees that are around us. They may no longer be with us, but when they were, they remembered planting those trees. And something as silly as a tree, walking under a tree, wondering how it got there, how old they must be, how long they've been there. Will they be there when I'm gone? You look around and trees are getting cut down all over the place to make room for more houses, more houses, more houses. And I'm in construction. I'm not anti-housing. I'm not anti-development, but At the same time, it kind of hurts to see those wide open spaces filled with homes. But honestly, I don't know who planted the oak trees around here, or if anybody planted them, or if they are just a gift from God. But if somebody did, I'm never going to know their name. But every time someone stands underneath the shade out here, they're benefiting from a decision made decades ago. And that's a beautiful thought. Because one day someone might drive into a building that I helped create. They might ride a horse that I helped train. I'm not a horse trainer. I'm not pretending to be, but I know when those horses were babies, I walked them a lot and got them on the halter and started to halter breaking them. So I'm going to take some credit there. Gosh darn it. You know, someday somebody might continue a family tradition that I started. Or they might work for a company that we helped grow. Or simply enjoy a world that's a little better because we were here. And you know, somebody might experience all that, and maybe it's you that is the person. Maybe it's not me. Maybe it's you. Maybe that's all your stuff that you might be contributing. And they might never know your name or my name. And maybe they don't need to, because none of us was ever meant to write the whole story, right? Again, we're just writing little chapters in the book. Little beautiful, happy little chapters in the book of life. We were just simply entrusted with the chapters that are our responsibilities. So maybe this week, don't ask yourself how far ahead you're getting. Ask yourself, when someone reads the chapter I wrote, will they be glad I took the time to write it well? Here's your royal decree. Someone after us will live with what we leave on the page. So when you're writing your chapter, write it well. I am King Roberto. This is the King's Court Podcast, recording in the King's Lair. If you like this episode, please share it. Hit the like button. If you want to tell me how much you like it, send me an email. Reach out on Instagram, X, or YouTube. Leave a comment. I'd love to hear from you. If you didn't like it, let me know too, because at least I know somebody's listening to this dang thing. So we'll be with you next week with another episode of whatever the hell I want to talk about. And until then, I will see you, or maybe talk to you later. Goodbye.